Cardiovascular diseases and stroke are largely preventable with those right health behaviors and knowing your health risk factors. And so I think it ultimately comes down to your lifestyle. While I think your genetics and your family history do play a part. When you look at approximately 80% can be prevented. So everybody can do something to make sure they have a full optimal heart health and brain health.
Good day. I'm Alisha Payne with the Woman Up Nation, here to elevate, educate, and empower women all across the world. I keep putting that in the atmosphere, all across the world, to walk in purpose, to live in passion, and to operate in power. We discuss all things, and I do mean all things that impact and improve the lives of women everywhere. And that's from health to wealth, fun to faith, and family and future, and everything in between. February is the month of love, and our theme is loving me, loving you. And why it's loving me first is because I need to love myself first before I can give all this authentic love to everyone else. So loving me, loving you is our theme for February, and we're discussing matters of the heart. Joining me today is a woman who knows quite a bit about the matters of the heart, and this is in the literal sense. This is Miss Nancy Tobbe. She is the Executive Director for the American Heart Association in Columbus, Ohio, whose primary mission for the last over 100 years is to be a relentless force for a world of longer and healthier lives. Miss Tobbe, I know you got a lot going on. you gearing up for the Go Red for Women, and so I won't hold you long, but I do appreciate you being on the Woman Up Nation podcast today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and you pretty much nailed our mission. So you might be hired for the American Heart Association soon.
I may need a job.
Yeah.
I'm just going to dive right into it, okay? I know that cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of women. It's causing 1 in 3 deaths annually. To me, that's really alarming.
Yes.
That's more than all forms of cancer combined. First, can you tell us what cardiovascular disease, or CVD, is?
Yeah, really, cardiovascular disease encompasses, disorders affecting your heart and your blood vessels. It encompasses really heart attacks, strokes, heart failure, congenital heart defects. So again, it's those disorders that are affecting your blood vessels and your heart.
Your blood vessels in your heart. What contributes to the disease? Like becoming, when you hear the number one killer and it's killing more women more than cancer, what contributes to CVD becoming the number one killer?
I think that's a great question because cardiovascular diseases and stroke are largely preventable with, those right health behaviors and knowing your health risk factors. And so I think it ultimately comes down to your lifestyle. While, I think, your genetics and your family history do play a part. When you look at, nearly approximately 80% can be prevented. So everybody can do something to make sure they have a full optimal heart health and brain health.
So 80% of cardiovascular disease can be prevented.
Yes, approximately 80% of events are preventable with you looking at those right health risk factors and health behaviors.
Okay. And so what are some of the signs and symptoms that we should be looking out for?
And I think for women, and again, cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of all Americans. And it's the number one killer, you mentioned globally. We are an international organization. But I think what was
Yes,
so,
ma'am.
eye opening for us was that women were, one, unaware that it is their
Mm-hmm.
number one health risk. And then it was also looking at women are just presented differently. And we just don't know enough yet of why. Women are not just smaller men. Women present
Right.
differently when it comes to heart attack symptoms. While they still can experience those common heart attack, symptoms, everybody always thinks, oh, the tightness in the chest, the
Right.
weakness in your arm. I think what we're finding is that women are experiencing flu-like symptoms, back pain, jaw pain, those types of things are also factors when we're looking at kind of
Mm.
heart type events for women.
So all of those are signs that something may be going awry in your heart. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
like you said, I think yes, those are all shortness of breath, that chest pain, those that back pain, nausea, flu-like symptoms. Again, it goes back to, are you listening to your body? And if it just
Right.
doesn't feel right, go see your doctor. If it's a true emergency, please call 911 and get in to see a doctor right away.
That's good information because you never think about the other things, the flu-like symptoms. You know what I mean. A lot of us associate that with just the chest pains and the pain
Yes.
in your arm, but the other back pain, I don't think I ever heard that before. And so that's good to know that there's other symptoms that we should really learn our bodies and know when something is not right to seek
Yeah.
medical assistance. Sounds like what I'm hearing you say.
Times too, we have to be champions and advocates for our health. Again, we see women
Right.
be turned away when they do go see to the ER, or they're misinterpreted. Sometimes it's chalked up to anxiety or stress, and I think it's so important we really to
Hmm.
empower ourselves to be advocates for our own health. And so if you don't feel like you're getting the answers that you want, it's okay to get a second or third opinion, as I
Yes.
mentioned, and just continue to advocate for your own health.
I like what you said about that because it's funny how we take care of everybody else in our home. We take care of our spouses and our partners and making sure our children get the proper care, and we're taking them to their visits to the doctor's office, but we rarely
Absolutely.
do this for ourselves. And that's why it's so important to be talking to you today about, reminding women in the month of love to make sure part of your loving on yourself is taking better care of your health and learning your body and learning the warning signs and symptoms and knowing when things don't feel right. To don't wait and put yourself on the back burner. Go immediately to have that checked.
They say on the airplane, put your mask on first before you can help
Yes.
somebody else. Because if you're not breathing, you can't help anybody else. And it's very true as women, and I am just as guilty of it. You line up
Yes.
everybody else's doctor's appointments and their checkups, and if you encourage them to go see a doctor, and again, you're taking your caretakers, you're taking care of
Right.
multiple generations. And I think if we're not taking care of ourselves, who's going to do it if you're not there? So again, it's okay to be. I always say, like, self-care
Yes.
is not selfish. It's you're actually being best for yourself, but you're best for your loved ones as well.
Can you say that part again? The best for yourself. I love that.
I,
Being.
I would say self-care is not
Mhm.
selfish. If you're not
Yes.
taking care and you're not your best, optimal, healthy self, then how are you going to be able to
Absolutely.
take care of those around you and your loved ones? Because they're relying on you many, many
Yes.
times, day in and day out.
You get an amen on for that on over here. I'm like checking that off, making sure these
Yeah.
ladies are listening to that. Now, are there any particular race of people or ethnic group that are more subjected to CVD?
I think what's interesting in our science is showing is, women are impacted throughout their entire phases and stages of their life. And so while we want to make sure that preventable science and education is there at the younger, I think then we're seeing women in their
Yes.
maternal stage. Number one killer of new moms is cardiovascular disease. And then when you look at it as we're
Ah,
aging, our hormones, we just don't know enough. Our hormones and menopause and perimenopause are impacting our overall cardiovascular and brain health. So again, it's not one size fits all. And then as we
right.
take a look back, there are populations that are disproportionately impacted by cardiovascular disease. We look at our African American community, we look at our
Hmm.
Hispanic community, our Asian American community, all have higher rates of cardiovascular disease and stroke, higher rates of obesity, higher rates of diabetes.
Yes.
All of those play key factors in cardiovascular and brain health.
Oh. Are these people calculated when the studies are being done for, cardiovascular disease? Are they thought about? Are they implemented into these studies? Or is that something
I think
more
we're
new?
getting better when it comes to
Yeah.
science. As the
Yeah.
American Heart Association, we're huge advocates of making sure research projects
Hmm.
represent all.
Right.
Women weren't necessarily part of research projects really up until the last 3 decades. And if you think about that, again,
Wow.
the prototype for care is based on our male counterpart. And so now we have a
Yes.
female prototype for guidance and care. But then you look at it, we need more women at the table. We have our Research
Yes,
Goes Red
ma'am.
project. We need more women women opting in to help us solve these problems. We need more women, and diversity in STEM careers as well, because we
Yes.
need them at the table helping solve these big problems. So, I think we need more science and research. We need more voices really
Yeah.
speaking on behalf of women's health, and we need diversity in all areas when it comes to those two particular components of science and education and awareness.
So women, there is a seat at the table. We just have to sometimes take our rightly position, right?
Absolutely, yes. Increase in STEM careers, while but still females are only at 25%. So, I think in what we're
Yeah.
finding is patients want to, see physicians or healthcare professionals that look like them. And so again, we want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure we're encouraging, those young minds to really consider careers in STEM. As an organization, we created STEM Goes Red to encourage middle school and high
Mm-hmm.
school girls to look at careers early in their life and inspire them to be, those next advocates for heart and brain health. So I think we're just continuing to, yes, be at the table, let our voices be
Yes.
heard, but there's still so much more we can be doing for advocating for women's health.
Well, I'm glad that you put that out there. You put a plug too for women getting into the STEMs area because it is definitely much needed. Let me ask you
Yes.
this. Are there any annual exams or screenings that we can do as women, like preventive measures?
Absolutely. I think so many times as women we do, we make sure we go and get our mammogram and our pap smear,
Mm-hmm.
and that is wonderful. Preventative measures are fantastic, but are we going to our
Yes.
primary care doctor just as often yearly? Are we getting our blood pressure checked? Are we
Yes.
getting our cholesterol checked? Do we know our glucose levels? Do we know our cholesterol? All of those are
That's
factors,
good.
health risk factors, and then are we, again, looking at our physical activity? Are we looking at sleep? Sleep is now one of our life's
Mm-hmm.
essential eight, that, that health behavior, 7 to 9 hours a night helps our overall cardiovascular and brain health. And then if you're a smoker, how can you lean in and find ways to quit smoking? Vaping is
Mm-hmm.
just as bad. So again, it's those are the things we can control, but going to that doctor yearly and getting that annual checkup is so important, and we're not seeing that as often for women. We're not going to the primary care
Right.
doctor just to get that, that well check, because a lot of times things can be caught and methods can be taken to make sure that you are on the right path for your overall health and well-being.
You know what? It's so important too, and I like that you put it that way. We need to make sure that we are going to our primary physicians, and then what conversations should we be having with our primary physicians?
I think also being honest with your primary care for, we all fill out the form and you're like, ooh, do I
Right.
want to admit that? I think they're not that, we want to be honest because they need to get a baseline of our overall health, but asking questions, is my blood pressure number in the right range? Is
Hmm.
my cholesterol level? What are things that I can be doing today that I don't have to go on medication? Or, I think there is medication that is helpful too. Do you know your family history? Talk about your family
Right.
history with your doctor. That is so critical, especially as we see, some of these younger generations, they're maybe not having those conversations around the dinner table of, family history until it's too late. So those are all things that you want to make sure to be able to share with your primary care doctor or your physician or whoever you're
Right.
talking to, because they need to see that full scope. But yeah, just, again, and if you're feeling a certain way, share that. And if you still feel like you're not getting the answers, as I mentioned earlier, it's okay to find a different doctor. I think that sometimes
Absolutely.
we feel like, that's not okay. It's kind of like your hairdresser. You don't want to break up with your
Uh-huh.
hairdresser.
Yeah.
You definitely, sometimes you need to, though. It's
Right.
definitely worth, advocating for yourself if you're not getting the right answers.
Yeah, advocate, be your own best. Advocate for yourself like we do for our spouses and our children. We go hard for them. And
Yes,
one
we
thing I would
do.
all we do, and I would also add, and I got this from a gynecologist that I just interviewed, Dr. Lisa Cardwell from Detroit metropolitan area. She's a gynecologist, and she had said, make sure that you write down before you go to your primary physician. Write down your questions because you get in there and
Yes.
like you said, oh, I'm fine. I feel good today, but we don't go into depth. with, you know, what we're really feeling on a regular basis. So I would even take it a step further and just reiterate that. Make sure that you have your questions for your physician. They're there to serve you, right? And so we need to make
Yeah.
sure that we are getting all the resources that we can and all the information that we can from our primary care physicians, and that they're giving us the best that they can give us with the information that we give to them. So that's where it starts,
Yeah.
giving them and being honest with them.
Yeah.
You have a big campaign going on this week. Go Red for Women. I wore my
Yes.
red in honor, even though I can't be there. I wore my red in honor. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, well, Go Red for Women is coming up on its 22nd year of our organization. Again, it's that, it started off as that grassroots movement to really educate and bring awareness that cardiovascular disease was the number one killer of women, is the number one killer of women. And,
Yes.
over the age of 20, majority of women over the age of 20
Wow.
have one risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And so Go Red for Women is one, brings together the community to around education awareness, celebrate, where we're heading when it comes to women's health, but the work that we still
Yes.
have to do. I think this year we're really, making sure that women are taking those actions. We'll be
Yes.
celebrating at a luncheon coming up, and there's luncheons all across the country, throughout the year, but we want to make sure that the, individuals who are leaving know to take their actions, take their blood pressure, their cholesterol,
Right.
be mindful, getting tips on being mindful, and mental health is such a critical piece of our overall cardiovascular and brain health. So, I'm really excited. Go Red for Women, while we've made, strides in bringing education awareness, still women are not acknowledging that it can happen to them. So, we still have a lot of work to do, but when you see a
Yeah.
sea of red and individuals who are sharing with their friends and family what they learn through Go Red for Women, that's all we can ask for is, like, if anything, if you learn something, go tell a friend, go tell five friends, encourage
Yeah.
them to take care of themselves. And that's really what Go Red for Women is all about, is kind of that empowering each other and all of us
Right.
coming together to change the trajectory of women's heart health.
That's amazing, and just to see the sea of women in red is just a beautiful celebration of life. You
Yes.
mentioned something else, that it's happening all over the country. Where can people find that information? Where can we find the information to, not just the Go Red for Women, but the American Heart Association?
There's two great resources. There's heart.org, which has a lot of resources in general, everything we've talked about today and even more. I think then there's goredforwomen.org. So specifically our
Okay.
Go Red for Women resources are on that site as well. So two great resources.
And on those sites too, I do know hard.org, you can make sure to donate. If you believe in giving to a cause that's worthy, this is one of those causes that's really worthy of your financial blessing. So I know you didn't ask me to say that, but it is a site where you can donate. So I'm just throwing that shameless plug out there because I know it's for a worthy cause. Miss
Well, I
Tobbe.
appreciate that. Yes.
Oh
We need to
man.
continue to fuel the engine of our mission and fund more science and research and programs that
Yes.
help support women's health. So thank you for that. I know
Oh
you
yes.
didn't say you were going to, but thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you all do to bring awareness, and the studies that you do, and making people, not just women, but people feel heard and seen. And I just thank you so much, like, again, for the amazing work that the American Heart Association has been doing for over 100 years. Over 100 years.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate the time and just the platform to be able to continue to share our mission, and hopefully encourage those who are listening to take action for themselves.
Miss Tobbe, you have been a wealth of knowledge, and we weren't on long, but we were on strong. And again, I thank you so much. Again, go to the websites to either find out a little bit more about your own heart health, and to see where your Go Red for Women in your city is going to be, and again, to donate. Miss Tobbe, thank you so much. You have been great. You have a beautiful
Thank
rest
you.
of your day, okay? And thank you for bringing light to this world.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.